How's it going, friends? A pleasure being here again for another episode. Today we're going to delve a bit deeper into the story of the famous corrido 4x1, since many people want to know how that event happened. So, as we're here to please the audience, whatever they ask for, here I'll tell you how things happened. And I'm going to give you some extra data so you can learn a little more about this character so important to the man in the sombrero. Okay then. El Corrido. It has been playing a lot in the voice of Panther Velico, which, as far as it is known, although I can't confirm it, he's a family member of this song's main character. Originally, I think the corrido is sung by Eric Estrada in a duet with the Gatileros de Culiacan. That song. It came out around 2011, but to understand it much better, here I'm going to recommend these corridos where they also talk about that anecdote. One of them is called the 4x1, El Intercambio, and it's sung by the juniors of Culiacan. And there's another one that never came out that was only sung at private parties live called El Intercambio, and the Mayitos from Sinaloa sang it with Arlie Perez. If you listen to these three corridos, you'll get a better idea of what happened that day. The corrido says that the Pinos blew winds that a men was lifted, because on Highway 15 they were waiting for him at the speed bumps. A group of intelligence agents is the one that brought the order. The musicians, astonished, they mention Los Pinos, referring to the Mexican president's official residence, as it's known as Los Pinos. But for this case, it has nothing to do with it. They do it just to give more importance to the character, as if to imply that the operation was ordered by the presidency. But that is just not true. The Road 15 they mention is the free road from Culiacan to Mazatlan, and the corrido mentions the bumps of El Salado, where the military could catch Meño. Then, the corrido says that seeing that Suburban across the street, they thought they were enemies and went down to shoot them. "Cease fire," said the man. "The vehicle is from the military." Well, it was a Suburban that cut off Meño, and Meño thought they were enemies. And they got out to shoot them. But Meño realized they were soldiers, and he said, "Hey, do not shoot." As far as I know, that's not true, since the military didn't even give them time to react. When they had them subdued, the corrido says that they quickly showed that they were from military intelligence. They were told to put their hands up, get into the van, and they left from El Salado and took him to the military base. Well, you heard that the military immediately identified themselves as Army intelligence personnel, the usual stuff. They picked him up, put him in the truck, and took him to the 9th Military Zone there in Culiacan. Then the corrido goes on. That another smart group was roaming around ranches. The gang realized pretty soon and started looking for them. And over by the expressway, the tables turned. Here they talk about another smart group because there were two vans. Or at least that's what was known, that there were two trucks involved in the operation to capture Meño. Later the company's people found out. So they quickly started looking for them. And on the toll road, the Maxipista, that's where the tables turned. Then the corrido goes on. An armed commando arrived, ambushing the military. They take them down and take them away. Before that there was a scuffle, but they didn't want them resigned. The company had its plans. Yeah, the company's people arrived and there was a fight with the military until the military gave in because they ran out of ammunition, and I will explain later how that happened. Then the corrido says that a message was received at the headquarters. A message that said 4 for 1, release the one you took, or else you won't see any as a full-fledged lawyer. He got the man out of troubles. It talks about how they communicated with the military barracks and were offered to exchange the 4 detained soldiers for Meño. But let's continue with that story later. Then the corrido. It is said the man returned home because he holds a high rank, works in hot climates always in the days of May, and with intelligence group. Who knows what happened? So what happened? Meño came back, and it has a good position with Yoma and intelligence ones. Who knows what happened? I will tell you later what happened with them. Finally, the corrido says that the intercambio, that the heat of May calmed those winds. The pines were trembling because of all that movement, and thanks to a good lawyer, the man was not imprisoned. You know, as always, the musicians exaggerating everything, so the corridos hit. So here it talks about how the Yoma calmed down the military, and that Los Pinos, or the president of Mexico, is trembling because of all the movement. You know how musicians always exaggerate everything so that the corridos will hit. Here, it says, the say that Yoma calmed the military, and that the Pinos, it means the president of Mexico, is trembling because of all that movement. Something utterly absurd, since it wasn't that much that was done. Only a military truck got ambushed. That was all, which was something important back in those years, since it didn't happen often. And I mean, it wasn't much because it's nothing compared to what happened in the Culiacanazos, where it really was a big deal. Now, here's what I could find out from some sources, because the event and the operation mentioned in the corrido happened in broad daylight. I think it was around the year 2011. Everything was carried out by members of a special forces group of the Mexican Army. The goal was to capture Meño, one of Yoma's closest men, and they are also compadres. But who is Meño? Or what does Meño do? Well, as everyone already knows, Meño is one of the closest and most trusted men to Yoma. I think his name is Manuel Noriega. But he is much better known as Meño, and also as the 4 or 04. He's from the ranch of Higueras de Abuya. He's the master of that ranch, and as far as I know, everyone sees him very favorably, since he behaves very well with all the habitants there. But hear what people want to know. What happened on the day of the exchange? Here it goes. Well, it seems there were 2 suburban trucks with 4 soldiers in each truck. They arrived at the Salado area. One took the free highway from Culiacan to Salado, and the others went via the Maxipista and turned off at Quila. The 2 trucks trapped Meño, and another person they call the donkey. However, that part isn't mentioned in the corrido. Both were immediately neutralized and loaded onto the military vehicles. Since they were supposedly secured, and now I'll explain why I say supposedly secured. Well, once they had him in the van, they started the extraction procedure to get them out of Salado and move them to Culiacan. But in that time span, what do you think? The donkey managed to jump out of the truck tied up, but somehow he escaped from the soldiers and made a run for it. It seemed like the military didn't really care much because their goal was Meño, and by then they had him. They were taking him. Well secured. That's why the other guy, the donkey, wasn't of interest to them, and they let him go. And so the donkey was running and saw one of their own's Puntero parked car and jumped through the window and yells to the Puntero, "Get me out of here, come on, come on." And the driver all panicked because he was half asleep and suddenly sees someone flying tied to his car and starts yelling at him. So he listens and starts giving. Now, this donkey I'm talking about was the one who alerted everyone that the military had taken Meño into custody. And you can hear that in the corrido sung by the juniors from Culiacan, where they mention the donkey. So they started reporting on the radios that everyone should be very alert and try to locate the van in which they had taken Meño, but they were unsuccessful on the search for it, because that van had gone in code to Culiacan for the 9th Military Zone. What they could locate was the other truck, which, as I told you, was a Suburban. Well, he headed the road from Quila towards the Maxi Pista, which is the Culiacan-Mazatlan toll road. The lookouts were reporting it at every point the van was passing through. The whole crowd took off after the van to catch them, not knowing if Meño was in that truck. So when the military's Suburban reached the highway, it headed south, as if going to Mazatlan. By this time, everyone was fully alert, and the mission was to block the truck by any means necessary, a truck from Telcar people, specifically from the Panther people. That he was from the group of El Licenciado. They were the first to encounter the military's Suburban, and that's when a shootout began. The Panther's truck was chasing the military. By then, a brother of El Licenciado named Adolfo, who was a very good friend of Meño, and upon learning what happened, that Meño had been taken, he was at that moment with his brother. He told him that he was going to try to rescue Meño personally, because, as I say, they didn't know if they were taking him in that van that the spotters were reporting. Well, as Adolfo listened to everything being reported by the lookouts as to where it was heading, if it was heading to the van, and he took cover on one of the bridges, and there he was, waiting for the van. From the military, Adolfo was in an armored 2-door GMC Sierra, and along with Adolfo was Isio 3, one of Adolfo's bodyguards. And besides, he was carrying the bodyguard's truck, and they were listening on the radio that the military's truck was approaching. When Adolfo and his people finally saw them, they started shooting, but the military shot back just the same. And since the military were well-trained special forces, they had very good aim, that Adolfo. If he wouldn't have shielded himself with the armored door, there he would have been given up, since they shot the driver's door and the windshield 17 times, but Adolfo's people, as there were more elements, they scattered the Suburban with shots, and could no longer continue its journey but a few kilometers further, as reinforcements from the people were already arriving. For the military, they were running out of ammunition, but they didn't stop, even when the van could no longer continue moving at the same intensity. I had significantly reduced the speed. Meño, the mangun with their trucks began to crash into the Suburban. They were hitting the military truck on the sides. They were just at it when the Phantasma spoke through the radio, saying they should move, and then it gained a lot of momentum and hit them really hard from the back, and the truck stopped. El Phantasma wanted to resign the elements there, and the soldiers got out of the truck, with their hands up, shouting that they were military personnel. Do not shoot. El Phantasma told the boys he was going to resign them, but Adolfo stopped him, and he told him no. They shouldn't resign them because maybe it was better to capture them alive and wait for instructions to see what would happen next, since the van was wrecked by the time they were all there on the road. More people from the Bravo and more people from the Licenciado started to arrive. Just like they had done with Meño, they secured everyone. And as the whole event happened in the Pueblos Unidos area and the Melon, and as it was very close to El Dorado to not heat up, the decision was made to remove the military from that area. As everyone has heard in the corrido, there were 4 elements. I'd be lying if I said I remember the rank of the elements, but they were neither corporals nor privates. Everyone had a rank above the ordinary. What I can assure you is that there was a lieutenant and a captain. The ranks of the other 2 I don't remember. and each one of them was carrying a different tool, for instance. One carried an MP, another a 16, another an M4, and so on, implying that each one carried a different tool due to the rank they held, and because they had a well-defined strategy for the operation to capture Meño. Since the military, this is how they coordinate when planning a surgical operation. They choose the tools that best fit the operation's environment. Well, once the soldiers were secured, they were ordered to be taken to Cruz de Lota. There, René Bastidas was already waiting for them with an office ready to hold them. Much of the people involved in the operation to catch the military personnel returned to their bases, and to La Cruz, far fewer people went. As I tell you, to René's office, which, by the way, is across from Guas de la Cruz High School. There, the military were held and began to be interrogated. What the military managed to say, because what they asked the most was how they had caught Meño, who had given them the information. And the military said that they received the information directly from another intelligence group, and that they just passed on the orders, the information, and how and when they would act. So they didn't know who had snitched on Meño there or where that information for the capture had come from. For this, Meño was already in the 9th Military Zone alone, and the general of the area had already notified Mexico City of its existence. Successful arrest of Yoma's associate, just waiting to hear from the other participants in the capture. What would be his surprise when they were reported that there had been an encounter and communication had suddenly stopped? The minutes passed and El Fantasma didn't waste them. And since he couldn't resign to the military there on the road, he then began giving them special treatment, since he hated the military because he said they and their people always crossed the line. And they committed many abuses. So he took the initiative and started getting even. He did all sorts of things to them. René told him it was better to leave them alone. But since El Fantasma had more rank and seniority than René in the organization, obviously he didn't listen to him. For this, the idea of trying to make an exchange was considered. Once the military showed their IDs and stated their ranks, it was known they were prominent members. And that's how the negotiation began. Well, friends, here ends the first part of this story. Stay tuned for next week to know the second part of the story. Thanks everyone for your support and look forward to more content from your friend Okran. Greetings.